Hi there, I am Pamela Petrick, also known as the Dietless Dieting Coach, and I am a registered nurse, a certified holistic health coach, and busy women come to me when they are ready to ditch the yo-yo dieting, the constant weight regain, and the fatigue, and they are ready for natural, holistic strategies for their unique bodies so they can release the weight, keep it off, and feel light and free. And when they work with me via my Beyond the Fork Academy, we customize their journey for their own unique body. And so I am on a mission for you to find those solutions that are natural and holistic that'll work for your unique body, which is exactly why I created the Beyond the Food Weight Loss Summit, specifically designed for women over 40 who are ready to break free from the constant weight regain and nothing's working for you. This summit is different because I'm bringing together experts who will share their top strategies to help you release weight naturally without extreme diets, restrictions, or extreme workouts, and help you to achieve lasting weight loss and transform your health for good. Plus, every expert is giving you a free gift, all specifically geared for women over 40. Do you have your pen ready? It's time for our next featured expert for the Beyond the Food Weight Loss Summit, Real Solutions for Women Over 40.
Hey, so hello everyone, and welcome to my little talk on what your skin is trying to tell you. Now, quick introduction to me. So my name is Kate, and I am a nutritionist specializing in skin health and cellular rejuvenation. Now, you may be thinking, what has that got to do with weight loss? And I am actually a holistic weight loss coach as well. So I do still help support clients with, sustainable weight loss goals. But I really moved in specifically to the field of skin health and skin nutrition, partly because of my background as a skincare formulator, but also because what's really, really interesting about the health of the skin is it gets very often overlooked. We often dismiss problems, dry skin or acne and things, as being sort of not very important. But what's very interesting is, the skin is your largest organ. It is a great indicator of the overall health of your body, particularly at a cellular level. So when we come up against frustrating health problems, like, for example, if you've been trying to lose weight and you think you're doing all of the things, you're restricting the calories, or you're getting all the exercise, and very often people find it doesn't work. And that is usually because there are underlying factors. Our bodies are very, very complicated, and there are other things that we may not have considered. Now, what's very interesting about the skin health is that it can often act as, I like to say, a visible manifestation of the health of your overall body, because we can see it. We can look in the mirror and we can see, that didn't used to be there. Things are changing on our skin. And that can often be a really good indication of things like hormone imbalances, poor absorption in our gut, and leading to nutritional deficiencies. And all of these things impact absolutely everything to do with our health. In particular, it's, a huge influence on our metabolism. And if our metabolism isn't working as it should be, we're not going to be able to lose weight. So, what I want to talk about in this little presentation is really just a few of the indicators that we can look out for. Essentially, what is your skin trying to tell you? So if you are noticing these problems in your skin, then that can actually be really useful as a starting point for addressing them. Now, obviously, I should point out that if you do have, you notice any serious skin conditions, anything that, could be a medical problem, you should obviously have that checked out by a doctor. But having said that, there are an awful lot of what we often dismiss as trivial things, let's say, like we're getting, breakouts, or we're getting dry skin, or so on, that are actually super useful signs of something a little bit awry in the body. So, the first thing that I want to talk about here is inflammation. Now, this is a massive topic, and it's super important for health in general. It's something that's often talked about. You hear the words thrown about a lot, um, and it always becomes a little bit meaningless because people are using it so often. But what we're specifically talking about here is an issue which, in the vast majority of people, stems from kind of gut permeability. So you may hear this called leaky gut syndrome. Um, Now, when you think of the amount of people who have symptoms like IBS, the vast majority of people in our society have chronic constipation. They're getting bloating, they're getting stomach pains, they're getting, all sorts of these digestive issues. Now, when, when our digestive health is not functioning optimally, and again, it's one of these things that's often dismissed as not terribly important. And it is absolutely fundamental to everything in your health. That's no exaggeration. Because when you think about it, no matter what you are eating, you can be eating the most healthy diet in the world. But if you can't absorb the nutrients from it because your gut is not working properly, you're not getting any of that nutrition. And if you're not getting any nutrition, it's no exaggeration to say that you are what you eat, but more accurately, you are what you can absorb. Because if you're not getting that into your body, your body's going to fall apart. There are a lot of other serious consequences of this as well. So, for example, the vast majority of your immune system, that comes from your gut. So again, if that's not healthy, your immune system isn't healthy. So you can't fight off illness. Also, it has massive effect on your mood. Most of your serotonin, that happy hormone, that is produced in your gut. And the part of this that we very often overlook, and it has been overlooked by the medical profession for a very long time, and they are just starting to come around to it, accepting its importance, is your microbiome. The importance of this cannot be overstated either, because actually, depending on which source you read, it's anywhere from sort of 80 to 90% of the cells in your body are not human. They are not actually you at all. They did a fascinating study in this when they tried to, they actually mapped the human genome, and they found that most of the genes that we should have had were missing. I mean, we have less genes than a fruit fly, for example, because we don't need them. But those genes are contained in the microorganisms that live the majority in our gut. We have them all over us. We have them everywhere, but we have a huge, huge number in our gut. And we have a massive variety of species then, or at least we should do. Now, there are various reasons why we might have issues with that. And unfortunately, some of them are totally beyond your control. And for example, if you were born by cesarean, that causes a few issues in not getting the microbiome there in the first place. Also, breastfeeding is where we then get a huge amount of a bacteria from. And obviously, these things are not avoidable. It's quite sad. I mean, I know I myself was born by cesarean and was not able to breastfeed. So it's a little bit depressing when you look at that and think, well, I can't actually fix that now. It's nothing to worry about. You can fix it. But there are other things that go on throughout our life. So every course of antibiotics that you've had, that does devastation to the microbiome. And again, I'm not saying don't take antibiotics. Obviously, there are times when they are life-saving, but they should be used absolutely as an emergency. And of course, if you do live in a country, particularly in the USA, where farm animals are routinely pumped full of antibiotics, you are actually getting a clinical dose of antibiotics if you do eat meat. So again, there are a lot of factors going into this. There are also toxins in our environment. There are pollution, and all of these things. It's causing an onslaught on that microbiome. And unfortunately, one of the things that does is it causes a situation of what we call dysbiosis. We can end up with too many of the bacteria that we don't want in our gut, the so-called bad bacteria, as opposed to the good one. Unfortunately, antibiotics are a particular problem here because essentially, the analogy I like to use is if you imagine that the good bacteria in your gut are a bit like the sort of peace-loving hippies. So they come in and they set up camp in your gut, and they sit around a campfire playing the guitar, and they have a nice time. The bad bacteria, they're the sort of, skinheads coming with machine gun. And because your peaceful bacteria, they've chosen to live in symbiosis with you. So your immune system doesn't attack them. They are actually producing vitamins and things for you. They are, doing a fantastic job in there. So you're all living in harmony and everything's, peace and love and it's all good. The bad bacteria, of course, well, they make a living by attacking you and stealing your nutrients. Well, obviously your immune system fights back. So they have to be in a constant state of battle with your immune system. So they're quite, hardened, sort of, tough creatures. So obviously, when you put something like an antibiotic, the name meaning anti-life, it's going to kill everything. It's kind of obvious when you think about it that the, machine gun wielding bacteria are going to survive better than your peace-loving hippies. So sadly, what it often does is the antibiotic wipes out far more of the good bacteria than the bad bacteria, and the bad bacteria recover faster. And so their population will obviously increase, much more quickly. So I could obviously go into this in much more depth, but I don't want to risk going off a total tangent. The important takeaway in all of this is that we really, really need to boost the numbers of those good bacteria. And as I say, there are just so many factors now that are sort of pouring in on us to try and destroy them. But do not despair, because there is a lot of hope. We absolutely can start to restore them. But we do have to do it in the right way. So you've probably heard a lot of talk about probiotics, prebiotics, all of these things. Now, prebiotics, they are great. Now, what they are is the food that feeds our good bacteria. Now, absolutely everybody should be eating as many of these as possible, but you don't need to buy expensive supplements. Nothing like that, don't worry. We want something like this. Your simple fruit, vegetables, all of these things, whole grains. Basically, if it's good for the human, very often the reason is because it's actually good for the bacteria. So an awful lot of the fruit we eat, for example, you probably hear, oh, fruit, it's full of vitamins. This is true, but in an awful lot of cases, actually, we can't digest them. They're full of all sorts of fiber that we don't actually digest them at all. What does actually start to break those things down is the bacteria in our gut. And then what they excrete is, well, vitamins. So there are so many phytochemicals like that. And so the more fruit and vegetables that you can pack into your diet, the better. Now, probably might come as a surprise to anyone that these good bacteria did not evolve to eat McDonald's. So, processed junk food, unfortunately, especially because it's very high in refined sugar, all the saturated fats, not only are they not good for us, but what they also do is they are feeding those bad bacteria. So again, that's definitely something that we want to avoid. On the other hand, yes, the good bacteria, they love fruits and vegetables, all of these good things as well. So the really good news is that the bacteria, if we get enough of our good bacteria going on, they can actually start to heal that intestinal permeability that we talked about. Now, that, coming back to where we started with inflammation, that is a huge, huge cause of that. Because if you imagine you've got holes punched in your intestine, bits of undigested food are going to get into your bloodstream. Now, your immune system tries to attack that, and that causes massive amounts of inflammation. Now, this can be incredibly serious, because this then obviously increases your chances of getting all sorts of autoimmune diseases, so things like the asthma, the eczema, obviously, which where we often see it on the skin, but then obviously things like MS, all these things are autoimmune diseases as well. So it's definitely something we don't want happening. It can be very serious. But very often people are living in this sort of state, this sort of mild inflammation. And you wonder how you got a hole in your intestine in the first place. Your intestine walls, obviously, they are very, very thin. They have to be, because they do allow, obviously, molecules of food that's probably broken down to pass through them. So it's not actually difficult to punch holes in there. And one of the very common things that does it is gluten. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone should avoid gluten, but it is, that is a common one. One of the other things, massive cause of inflammation, is dairy. Now, particularly depending on what country you live in, the US, again, unfortunately, farming standards there are very poor. And so again, that dairy is like to be packed full of artificial growth hormones, and the inflammatory effect of that is far worse. But it is the case in any case, because cow's milk, obviously, naturally, it does contain growth hormones because it is meant to make a baby cow grow. So yeah, as I said, I could go into the whole, host of reasons why dairy is inflammatory. But the other thing, obviously, essentially any animal products, again, they are causing inflammation because our bodies are not really designed to digest them. We are frugivores. They are designed to digest fruit and vegetables and nuts and seeds. And some whole grains. We can throw those in there as well. You want to be a little bit careful, as I say, with those grains. Things like, the wheat. Very often it's been saturated in glyphosate, which is another potential issue. So yeah, again, that's a little bit of a questionable one. You can get testing done to test your sort of inflammation levels and the inflammatory response that you might get to various, foods. It can be quite expensive. Sometimes an elimination diet works better, which can be a little bit time consuming. But if you start with the obvious candidates, to try cutting out dairy for a couple of weeks and see if you feel better, that can be a good way to go. And as I say, you can really observe these symptoms in sort of two places. If you are getting digestive symptoms, the bloating, constipation, diarrhea, these things, then obviously you can see if those improve. But not everybody just get them. One of the other common signs of inflammation is, as I say, coming out in the skin. So if you are getting eczema, for example, now that is an autoimmune condition. So we know our immune system is perhaps not functioning as it should be. The other thing, obviously, that is influencing inflammation is acne. So if you are getting breakouts or full-scale, acne, then again, that is definitely a sign of inflammation. Now, it's worth pointing out that another major source of inflammation is stress. These days we all lead stressful lives, and you can't always reduce the stress in your life. Ideally, you try to, but you can't always. But what you can work on is your response to the stress. So there are all sorts of different ways that we can do this, depending on what works for you. It can be something as simple as getting out in nature. That's great anyway, because if you can get some sun onto your face, some of that natural daylight, again, that is going to really, really help. A lot of people are just not getting enough daylight. And you do actually need some sunlight on your face. Now, if you live in a country with very strong UV rays, then you've probably been told you must protect yourself from your skin from the sun. And that is not wrong, but you do still want sort of 10, 15 minutes of sun, preferably in the morning. Don't go out at midday when it's really, really hot. But get that onto your face and onto your arms without sunscreen. Then put sunscreen on. And because actually your immune system does not function properly if it doesn't have enough vitamin D, and the best source of that is sunlight. So we do want to get some of that daylight onto our face. And if we can get it sort of in the morning, ideal for getting that serotonin started. So what then is the connection with inflammation and weight loss? Well, if we are getting these issues in our gut, which is leading to inflammation, then that is a major source of stress in itself on our body, even apart from any other stress we might be having in our life. Now, stress automatically causes us to store fat, because when you think back to when, our species were evolved, that would be our major source of stress. Obviously, deadlines and work commitments and things didn't really come into it, but what did come into it was starvation for various reasons. Natural disaster, or, to move somewhere and, the food ran out. So as soon as we start to suffer from stress, our body's natural reaction is to cause us to feel extremely hungry, to get cravings for the most high-calorie food that you can find, to then pack all that away and store it as fat. And it will not burn the fat. It just won't, because it thinks, nope, I need to save it. And And that is why people can get into a very frustrating situation where they're eating less, but they still seem to be putting on weight, which seems impossible. Obviously, yeah, then there's people sort of trying to starve the weight off, which is absolutely what we do not want. That obviously will become, extremely unhealthy. So what we really want to do is to reduce that inflammation. And one of the best ways to do that is, rather than focusing so much on what we need to cut out of our diet, yes, refined sugar, we know it's bad for us. We know the junk food's not good. We know these things. But actually, what I like to focus on is, well, what food can we add in? Because what we can then do is we can actually start to crowd out that junk food. And this is where that microbiome actually becomes really, really interesting. Because so much of what we think of as these cravings, and very often we feel guilty because, I lack the willpower and so on. But what's really interesting to remember is that, there are trillions of these organisms that are living inside of you. And they have a communication method because they evolved alongside you to live in symbiosis with you. So they're not cut off from you, living in some kind of void. Now, when we get cravings, often for things like sugar and salt, very often where they're coming from is they're coming from microorganisms that living inside you that are craving those things. So, for example, when we get like a yeast overgrowth, it craves sugar. So you will crave sugar because it's saying, please feed me. But all of those good bacteria, which should massively outnumber the bad ones, when we can start to restore them, that's what they will do. They have cravings too. What they crave is fruit and vegetables. So what is actually really interesting, and a lot of people didn't really believe this until they actually experienced it, and they really shocked. Oh, okay, I don't want to eat the chocolate and donuts anymore. Actually, what I really want is a banana. As you start to reset your taste buds, you start to reset your microbiome, then you actually find that yes, the good bacteria's cravings are actually taking over. So that is a really, really good way to start to sort of, you start to restore that microbiome. And say fruit is absolutely great because it's super simple to eat. Even if you're in a rush, simple, you just grab a banana, grab it, and a bunch of grapes, all of these things, doesn't take any preparation time. And there is so much variety of fruit. I hear some people say, oh, I don't like fruit. Well, I'm sorry, I don't accept that argument. You have not tried every kind of fruit in the world. So, maybe find an interesting way of preparing it. So, for example, I like to use an actual coconut yogurt, which has been, fortified with live bacteria. So it's a probiotic. And yeah, that on a fruit salad, really, really delicious. It's quite sweet, even though there's barely any sugar in it. So, that's a really good a good way of just making it a bit more interesting. And that brings us on to the little topic of probiotics, which I do want to mention. They're often touted as being the solution to everything. Now they can be very good for some people. There's a lot of probiotic supplements on the market, which I don't tend to recommend because they are fabulously expensive and most of them are just not very good. The tricky thing is that the life cycle of one of the bacteria that lives in your microbiome is approximately 20 minutes. So once you take the bacteria out of, their natural environment, which is in your bowel, it's very hard to keep it alive. You've somehow got to put enough food in there to keep that population going because you're not going to keep that bacterium alive. Obviously, it's distant descendants that are going to end up, in that supplement. So somehow you have to keep them alive and breeding. What they tend to do is if they refrigerate them to a certain temperature, they can go dormant. You can't get them too cold, then they'll die. So if you get a probiotic supplement and it's not being kept in the fridge the whole time, then you want to ask some serious questions about that. How are they keeping the bacteria alive? If they put enough food in them to keep breathing, well then, or how long has it been sitting on a shelf? Because there's a lot of generations of bacteria that is going to go, So I tend to tell people to save their money and not go down the probiotic supplement route. Now, there are a lot of natural probiotics you can get. So, yeah, live yogurt can be good. Ideally, we don't want dairy yogurt because dairy is very inflammatory. There are things you can make. So, homemade, sauerkraut, kombucha, kefir. There's so many of these things. Kimchi. There's basically every culture around the world has some kind of fermented food that they traditionally eat. And so, those can be very, very useful. However, there are some little caveats about that. With probiotics, if you do suffer from skin conditions like eczema, psoriasis, things where increased histamine may not be the best idea, they do contain histamine. So they can actually trigger off allergies. The other thing we want to be very careful about is if our gut has got into such an unhealthy state, what can actually happen is even putting so-called good bacteria in, they can end up living in the wrong place. So they can end up setting up home in your small intestine. That can then throw things out of balance, and we can end up, it has been linked to SIBO, which is a condition of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we want to be a little bit careful with probiotics, and I would recommend speaking to a practitioner before sort of, overloading your body with probiotics. But the good news is, even just taking the prebiotics, feeding what you already have, feeding the bacteria that are there, that can actually make a huge, huge difference to your health. So in summary, when we do see signs and say of inflammation on our skin, which could come out as random patches on our skin, it could come out as skin rashes, it could be eczema, it could be acne. All of these things indicate, inflammation. And if that skin is inflamed, then there's a fair chance there's inflammation elsewhere in our body. And one of those common causes of it, as I say, is this gut permeability. So what we really want to do is, have a good think about our gut health. As I say, gut health is hugely complicated. And I do always recommend speaking to a practitioner if you possibly can. But some of the simple steps that you can absolutely do right now is eat more fruits and vegetables. Hugely, hugely important. Now, related to inflammation is the issue of hormones. Now, again, bit of a big topic, so I'm just going to sort of summarize some of those sort of key issues. And so one hormone that gets a lot of press, if you like, is cortisol. Now, it's characterized as our stress hormone, which it basically is. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's it's meant to save our life in emergency situation. And small amounts of stress on the body are actually good. So that's what we do when we exercise, for example. If we do a vigorous workout, we're putting our body under stress. And in small doses, that's good for us. Keeps our immune system working, keep the blood flowing, there's so many things about that that's actually a good thing. But when we become chronically stressed, the sort of situation that a lot of people are living in at the moment, then obviously our cortisol level is permanently running high. Now, this is not good for anything. One of the things it's not good for is obviously our ability to lose fat, because as I said earlier, if you are constantly stressed, you are constantly going to be holding on to fat. Now, this actually becomes a vicious cycle, because the kind of triglycerides that we store in fat, and particularly those visceral fats, so around the belly area, they actually contain toxins and these inflammatory cytokines. Now, the more fat cells you have, the more inflammatory cytokines produce. So you start to get more and more inflammation. But the inflammation, obviously, is causing stress, which is causing you to store more fat. And even if you do start to actually break the fat cells down, the toxins are then going to be released into your bloodstream, where they go around, and they are actually breathed out. That is where you lose most of your fat. Is actually in your breath, strangely enough. But yeah, you kind of get into the situation where you feel you can't win, because your body's desperately trying to fan onto the fat. It's getting more inflammation the more fat that it produces, and then if it does try to let it go, that's toxic as well. So, I totally understand when people can get very, very frustrated. So, we mentioned earlier a little bit about sort of stress management, how we can better respond to stress. there are all sorts of ways that people could, can do that, be it meditation, sort of mindfulness practices, um, all of these kinds of things. An interesting point is that eating a healthy diet and keeping properly hydrated actually, they are huge, huge factors in how we respond to stress. So all of these things are very, very important. Other things we need to do is we really want to support the health of our adrenal glands. So those are the little glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And one of the things they do, obviously, is they cortisol. And now, if they are, again, they're not functioning optimally, again, with a situation that's going to lead to poor health. And it's going to lead, as I say, to actually our metabolism suffering. And the reason being is that hormones don't work in isolation. So all hormones are working in a sort of a little symphony that's extremely complex. Cortisol in particular, for example, it acts in a sort of like a little triangle with our thyroid hormones and our estrogen. So estrogen obviously has a major effect on our weight because it's one of the hormones that's controlling our reproductive cycle. It tells you, when you need to sort of put weight on or not, because obviously it's involved in, because say if you get pregnant, obviously you put quite a lot of weight on then. That causes you to store fat around the belly area. So obviously protect the baby. So estrogen has a huge impact on our ability or inability to lose fat. Now, thyroid hormone, obviously that is the major controller of our metabolism. So the speed at which we can burn off calories, majorly, obviously is controlled by those thyroid hormones. So when they're going in this back and forth, just throwing our cortisol out of balance, that's going to mess up our metabolism. It's going to cause, store more fat. And all of these things, as I say, turn into a vicious cycle. And obviously we don't want our thyroid hormones marked up anyway, because we certainly don't want to end up with, thyroid disease. So what we really want to do, as I say, try to get those adrenals functioning optimally. And one of the things that we can do, again, is all comes back to diet. So proper hydration levels, super, super important. Adrenal glands need a lot of water to function. And strangely enough, something they also need is salt. So you want to be a little bit careful. If you are drinking a lot of water, particularly if you suddenly increase the amount of water you're drinking, you don't want to end up actually diluting your body's salt. Now, we're always told that we get too much salt in our diet, and this is true for most people. And what we don't want is that sort of refined, processed table salt, the kind that sort of you pour out of a shaker in a diner or something. We definitely don't want that. Now, that is obviously packed into processed foods, which we want to try and be avoiding anyway. But what we do want is a little bit of a good quality sea salt or rock salt. They have so many other trace minerals in them as well. And that can actually really help to support the adrenals. But it is all about moderation. As I say, what we want is like a teensy little bit. And it can really help to sort of, to flavor the food when you eat well. We do not want to obviously be pouring on copious amounts of table salt. Something else we need lots of is vitamin C, which, contrary to what the media tell us sometimes, does not just come from oranges, though oranges are great. If you start the day off with freshly squeezed orange juice, that's absolutely fantastic. Now, there's been a bit of a backlash from some quarters saying, oh, that's full of sugar. Well, technically, yes, it does have sugar in it. But if you are, assuming that you're drinking unfiltered, so you're getting all the oranges, well, you are still getting some fiber in. Absolutely. And there really is, as I say, nothing wrong with it. Or to put it another way, if you were going to drink a sort of can of Coke, for example, replacing that with orange juice would be hugely beneficial. So yes, absolutely. Orange juice, is a great sort of start to the day. But yes, we do want orange juice, not orange squash. Please do not bring. But the more sort of fruits and vegetables and things that we can pack in, they all, contain vitamin C to a greater or lesser extent. That is hugely important. In any case, but obviously supporting our immune system and helping us respond better to stress. And we also want to get also those B vitamins. So again, our dark leafy green vegetables, absolutely fantastic. Now, I know not everyone likes them. I've never been a fan of them myself. And I do find actually, of all these things, if you do train yourself to eat them over time, it does help. I mean, I can tolerate spinach quite well now. But a little tip, if you are someone who really doesn't like them, is to put them in a smoothie. Um, if you make a nice smoothie, so what I like to do is to use frozen berries. This is great because berries are really, really good for you, but they're very expensive fresh and they just don't keep. Frozen berries are great. So put them in a smoothie. And then if you can get a really nice, you know, sort of organic raw cacao powder, you put a teaspoon of that in it. The resulting smoothie basically just tastes like strawberries and chocolate. No matter what else you put in it. It's quite amazing. So you can really then go to town. You can put a handful of kale in, you can put a handful of spinach in, you can put all of these things in, and you just don't taste it. So yeah, that is a really good way of putting them in. But also things like spinach do kind of, if you've ever cooked them, they kind of just disappear. They sort of shrink down to almost nothing. So to be honest, most dishes you can sneak a little bit in without sort of really noticing. And so even if it's just, a little handful, each day, that is a good start. So yeah, and maybe experiment as well with other sorts of, leafy green vegetables. So there are lots and lots of different ones. So, you might find one you like. Another great thing you can do is try growing your own, even if you've only got, a little tiny balcony space or whatever it might be. That can really, really help. Sometimes they are just so much nicer when they are freshly picked. And there's a lot of them that it's very easy to get seeds. And they're super easy to grow. So yeah, there's just some other ways that you can get some extra B vitamins in there. A lot of people always ask me like, well, can I just take a supplement? And as a last resort, then yes, vitamin supplements can be helpful, but I would always try and look at the food first if you possibly can, because you can't out supplement a bad diet. And speaking of which, there are a few minerals that we want, and I don't tend to recommend anyone supplement with minerals unless it's under the close observation of a practitioner. The reason being that minerals actually are in a fascinating relationship with each other, like hormones, and an excess of one tends to lead to a deficiency of another, which leads to an excess of another one, and then a deficiency of another one. And it's so complicated that you can end up with more problems than you started with. But some of the key minerals that we want to look at with supporting our hormone health are things like, little friends are sort of the magnesium and the copper and the zinc. And there's a few of them which are found in actually so many foods. For example, the cacao powder I mentioned earlier. So, and if we look at this, we can see how high it is in copper. It's also got your zinc, your iron, your magnesium, phosphorus, calcium, manganese. All of these things in short. Not that bad, is it? So yes, there are all sorts of ways that we can make healthy eating really, really fun. And as I say, we don't really need all these supplements and things. As I say, some good quality cacao powder is great. There are so many herbs and spices that you can chuck into meals, make them really, really fun and interesting. And you're actually, you're getting a huge boost to your nutrition at the same time. So, yes, in terms of cortisol, interestingly, our skin actually produces cortisol itself as well. It's not just producing it in the adrenal. So again, when we start to see signs of that, the inflammation on our skin, again, that can indicate that we do have, like cortisol levels raised above what they should be. And that, as I say, it does become a vicious cycle. It affects our sleep, which then means we can't clear the cortisol out, so we're getting more stress. But one of the really, really easy interventions that we can run in, just start to eat more of those good foods. So the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, the nuts and seeds, and also, I say these herbs and spices and things, they can be absolutely fantastic for lowering that inflammation, lowering our stress, and all of that has a knock-on effect then. What's really encouraging, I always felt, is that we often talk about how these things become vicious cycles. One bad habit compounds upon another one, and then, of course, that causes something else, it causes another problem. But what's really positive about this is that it works in reverse as well. So even just making one positive change, like eating more fruit in the day, what that does is that helps us start to lower the cortisol levels. So then that, it starts to lower that inflammation. So we sleep better. So then we don't feel as stressed. So then that starts to bring that down even more. So the good habits will all compound upon each other as well. And then, if we're thinking more clearly, we're more able to say, no, actually, I'm going to choose not to eat the donut because I care about my health, and I'm going to eat the banana instead. And the more times that we can do that, the better it will be. Now, that doesn't mean that, we won't occasionally, have an indulgence, and that is fine. We absolutely do not want to be beating ourselves up about that. What we like to talk about is the 80-20 rule in nutrition. So if 80% of our diet is good, healthy, nutritionally dense food, then yes, of course we can have some treat. And we don't want to think about it as this mentality that we have to give up everything we love. Instead, try and think of ways that we can make food that we love, but it is also healthy. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can start to replace the foods that we know aren't great for us with good, healthy food that also taste great, then the better. And what we end up with, as they will work with my clients, our aim is to get that wonderful glowing skin that gives you that confidence. The side effects of that are that your metabolism is going to be more settled down. You're going to have more energy, you're going to feel great, your immune system is going to work better, you can sleep properly, your relationships are also going to be better because your mood's going to be so much better, you're going to keep snapping all the time. So all of these things really, really help. And obviously, as part of that as well, we just start to reduce the fat, and we will naturally become a healthy weight and stay there, which is what we really want. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this whistle-stop tour through a couple of the things I like to look at with skin health, and really what your skin is trying to tell you. So, if you want to find out more, obviously I do have a free gift as part of the summit, which is a beauty nutrition guide. And that really goes into a lot more detail about some of the things that I've talked about, and talks about, skin health, and then all of the related areas of that, and starts to talk about, some of the practical areas that we can, strategies we can implement to improve it, and have some great recipes and things in that as well. So, and all of the details, about how you can follow me, find out more about me on my website, etc., are in the guide. So, do please check that out if you want to find out more. And I hope to see you over on my social media or my website or something, wherever it might be, sometime soon. So thank you for watching.